Finance Committee meeting, CCWD Finance Committee meeting, Tuesday, May 19th. Would you all please rise and join me in the pledge? All right. Item number 1 on our agenda today is public comment. Comments, as usual, are limited to 3 minutes per person. Do we have any public comments either here or online? Okay, next item, approval of the minutes of our April 28th meeting. Okay, I'll second that. All in favor, say aye. Aye. That's approved. The minutes are approved. Okay, under new business, we have 3A, the 2026 rate study. Review of that by Habib Isaac with IB Consulting. Hello, Habib. Please come up.
Good afternoon, board members and for Finance Committee. I'm going to go through a presentation with, we've been working with district staff over the last couple of months, about the last 30, 60 days, to review how the district is performing in terms of the rates that were adopted and the part of the budgetary process for helping out with setting the budget for 2027. And they're going to be presentation pulled up. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. So we're going to go over a financial plan overview, what we look at, what we go through with district staff, update on the water financial plan, and then an update on the wastewater financial plan, and then recommendations for the remaining proposed rates that were adopted as part of the last rate cycle, that you still have rates on schedule for 26, fiscal year 27 and fiscal year 28. When we work with city staff or district staff, there's a couple of things that we do. First, we go through the expenses, we look through the budgets, and we identify line item by line item what expenses are changing between operating, capital, anything like that sort. We also update the water demand and the usage trends of your customers. So when we did the last rate study was in 2027, we update the usage characteristics of your customers and all the meter counts for 24, 25, and now 26. We also recalculate your revenue. So we don't just rely on your budget numbers. We recalculate the revenue based on the number of meters by size and the usage by tier, determine what the revenue projections are based on the raw billing data. And then we compare that to your actuals of your last fiscal year. And then we want to make sure that we're within 3% on water, and with wastewater, we want to be within 1%. The reason the difference, because with water, there's still quite a bit on the volumetric side that could vary based on accrues and timing, things of that sort. And then also a big part of any type of update is your capital improvement plan. That changes on an annual basis. So then we update that, and we also looking at comparing that to what was projected in the rate study. And then lastly, we want to make sure that you are maintaining your reserves. One thing that was done at the rate study time at the public hearing, the board decided at the public hearing to reduce rates for all the years. So from that standpoint, we amended our report to show what were the projections based on board action at the public hearing. So then we'll also show the comparison of that compared to where you are today. Any questions on that? Okay, no problem. So here are some of the things that we updated for the 2026 annual update. We updated fiscal year 24 and 25 to actuals. Before those were projections when we were doing the 23 rate study. We incorporated the 26 budget and as well as the starting reserve balances for 26, which is starting balances as of July 1st, 2025. We capture new accounts and the usage data, as I mentioned. We updated capital improvement plan as well as the funding sources. You have a lot of grants as well as debt financing. So then we wanted to make sure that we identify how much of your capital is funded by other funding sources and how much is funded by your rates. And then we also review the financial outlook at notice rates. So with all that information, we then update our projections and then we update the financial plan projections for the next 5 years. But your last year of the rate study was 2028. So then we're going to be focused on how we're looking now in terms of looking out to 28 compared to the rate study. So with the water financial plan, the first thing I want to show is where we were during the rate study. So as I mentioned, the board took action at the public hearing where instead of the recommended rates that were noticed that we came up with, we had notice increases of 22, 18, 16, 16, and 15%. Granted, during that time, it was pretty hefty increases that you needed. The district needed to rebuild their reserves. Yeah, a lot of capital improvements had to be done. There was iterations of reducing the capital plan, but at any event, there was still pretty significant increases. And due to that, the board decided to take action at a public hearing to reduce those increases based on feedback of public comment. So then below shows what the board adopted, which was 22, 12, 13, 7, and 7. And then with that board action, it then meant that you were not going to meet your minimum reserve requirement. And this shows your ending fund balances and the projections back in 23 after board action. And then your minimum requirement is that red trend line, which includes operating capital, rate stabilization. So it will show in fiscal year 28 that you're going to be below your minimum requirement. And that was just part of what the board decided in terms of how to reduce rates. Yes. Sure.
So let me ask, what are the
Sure. The minimum reserve requirements, it's in our report. So the minimum requirement was 90 days of operating. For the capital, you always want to have at least 1 year's worth of capital spending. Mhm. Yeah, I could,
It's based on the ones that are in policy right now.
so I could get the information. I could just pull up my model from on my computer and I could give you the exact dollar amounts of each one. That's not a problem. But in aggregate, those combined, the minimum requirement is roughly around 14 million when you get to fiscal year 2028.
I would really like to see those. just
Absolutely.
Because that seems to be driving a bit of our conversation, right? Minimum reserves.
Well, right now, we're not changing rates. We're just showing you how are you doing based on the adopted rates of today.
I'll circle back on this, but my question will stand later on. Dang it.
Okay. I'm sorry, did you have another question or you said it?
No, I want to know what we're measuring against this red line and this dotted line, and I just wanted to know what those
Yeah,
represent.
there's a finance committee, so I could just pull out my computer right now and give you that information in this meeting.
Time to
Does that
do
work?
Yeah, I'll take a few minutes. Am I wrong in saying that this is a driver?
No,
Is this-
absolutely. This
Because this
is,
is what we're measuring, right?
yes, but we're not adjusting rates in any way because you already adopted rates. So we're not adjusting
No,
rates,
just-
increasing
We're,
them.
we're saying we're falling behind.
Yes,
And I want to know what that delta is.
yeah, no problem. I'll give that to you right now. I just may need to connect on.
I've got a
Wi-Fi.
list of our reserves, so you can just tell me what they are.
Yeah. So I'm going to give you the minimum requirements during the rate study because at the rate study, we had recommendations in our report. And then I'll give you the updated minimum requirements that we incorporated into this annual update that is based on you staying with what your existing policies were back then. Okay?
Show me.
Should be able to jump on the, I think it's CCWD guest.
Yeah, I think I did. Yeah, I'm online now. That was probably the quickest connection I've ever. Yeah.
I just want to get this figured out up front because this will guide the rest of our conversation.
Yeah, no problem. This is why we're here. This is why I'm here. So let me answer those questions for you. We'll just focus on water for now, if that's okay. And then we could do the same thing with wastewater when we get to that.
Tell me what the fund number is also. That, these all seem to have varying
Yeah,
names.
I think we have the fund numbers on there. Give it a moment to have my colleagues Andrea Bowling and Lauren Demine on the Teams call. So sometimes they might have data quicker than I do. They could assist with that. One moment.
I assume we've got a policy setting these minimum numbers
Yes,
and a
that's
board
correct.
approved number.
Yes, that's correct.
I don't have it in my packet.
Yeah, I'm going
The
to.
policy, like you said, is kind of vague because it just says it's 90 days of operating.
All right. And I totally understand that. We've just got a lot of other reserve funds and I want to know which ones are filling up.
Okay. So, as I mentioned, there is recommendations in a report that you guys end up not updating. So, based on this graphic, I'm going to give you what the reserve components were that make up that red line. And then I'm going to give you what the actual reserve requirements today in 26 based on your existing policies that were not updated based on our recommendations. Does that make sense?
Tell me what you got.
Okay. So for operating, we recommended 90 days, and I'll go with, I'm going to focus on fiscal year 2028 because that's like our endpoint that we're focused on.
Why don't you focus on this year since that's the project we're
want-
doing today,
You want the beginning balance of 2026?
current balance.
Well-
I would also like to have evidence that this was an approved policy.
Sure. I don't have like your running current balance as of like today's date. I have
0.3 million according to
I
that.
have your starting balance at the beginning of fiscal year 2026, which would be July 1st, 2025, based on your audited financials.
Okay.
So let me go and give you that.
And Habib, it's Fund 300 for operating.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Maybe Andrea, you could identify those before I go to the next one.
We're talking about not the water funds, which are 300. I'm talking about the 500 series savings, operating reserve policies.
We're
Reserve policy 5006.01, operating reserves.
Fund 300 is the water reserve,
Okay.
is what she's referring to. 500 is.
Yeah,
the
we're
waste
focused on the
reserves.
water utility because they're independent, self-running business enterprises.
Okay.
Okay, so for the starting fund balance of 2026 for reserves,
I mean,
Would
do
be
you, do you,
3
do you recognize what I'm trying to figure out? I'm looking at your graph and
yeah,
I've got two lines and I want to know,
understood.
those are our goals and I want to know how those goals are set.
Okay, so right now, the operating reserve that we recommended was based on 90 days of operating expenses to have in your coffers for Fund 300.
Mhm.
And then for the end of fiscal year 25, which would be the beginning balance of 26, during the rate study, that was going to be $3.1 million.
That was what you proposed.
That's what our recommendations were. That is
Mhm.
correct. And I apologize, but I'm going to grab. All right. And then for the capital reserve, and Andrea, it'd be great if you give me that fund number,
325.
325. The starting balance that was projected for 2026 was $836,000. Then you had an emergency reserve. Emergency reserve pretty much has not really been touched, and that has been having a fund balance of $2,920,000. Then you have a debt-related reserve, and that debt reserve balance $101,521.
And Habib, just for
Mhm.
clarity, that debt reserve is not showing on that chart. That's the only that's included in that is unrestricted, which is operating, capital, rate stabilization, and emergency.
That's right.
We've got a
Yes.
debt service reserve as well.
Right, we
Say
have
that
that
ag-
separate.
Same thing.
Mhm.
120.
Yeah, we have it, but when we're looking at meeting your minimum requirement, we're focused on operating. Are you meeting your operating minimum? Are you meeting your capital minimum? And are you meeting your, are you meeting your emergency and rate stabilization minimums? Those are ones that we're focused on for that red trend line going across on the presentation.
Okay.
So then in aggregate, the total amount of minimum requirement for that red line in 2026 is $6.9 million, what we want to achieve. Okay.
Mhm.
All right. So then now,
Let me interrupt you for a second. You said that that red line
yes,
is 6 point what?
6.9 million.
Okay.
But that's across 3 different reserve funds, correct?
Yes, right. That's exactly right. Correct.
But-
Because we're looking at your unrestricted reserves in aggregate. That makes up your total minimum requirement of the utility as a separate enterprise.
Well, if the red line is 6.9 million, it's has a title of minimum reserve, but why is it on the graph? It looks like it might be starting off at 11 million, going to about
One
almost
second.
13.
One moment. Let me, one moment. Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies. I was giving him the fund balances,
Okay.
the actual balance. I wasn't giving, that was not the minimum. My apologies. He wanted the actual, was the balance, the starting balance. Those are starting balances. The actual minimum requirement, I could give you those too. So then you can compare where's our balance. So what I gave you right now was the balance at the start of fiscal 26. And then I could give you what is the target, the minimum requirement of each of those reserves. So for Fund 300, the minimum requirement is 5.33 million. For capital, it's 3.4 million. For rate stabilization, it's 1.9 million.
1 point what?
1.9 million. And then for emergency, and granted, I'm rounding, it's 2.4 million. So in totality, your minimum requirement for 2026 is $13 million. That's your minimum that you want to achieve.
Or minimum.
Yes, that's
So-
correct. And based on our recommendations, operating was going to be, we recommend 90 days of operating. For capital, we're looking at 1 year of depreciation of your asset value. So that makes sense too, because you want to kind of maintain your system. And that would be like the bare bones. We typically don't recommend that, but if you want to go like bare bones capital reserve would be depreciation. What we typically would recommend and industry standard would be more not looking in the history, but more looking forward looking of what are your capital plan expenses moving forward, because that's a better reflection of the revenue that you need in your coffers. And then for rate stabilization, that was 10% of total revenues. And emergency, that's typically a function of your asset value, which is the case here, and it's set to 3%. What we typically see in the industry is anywhere from 2 to 4%. So you're right in the middle of 3% of your asset value.
We've got asset replacement, if I'm reading this right, 7.9 million in that fund right now. I had a different zero when I was trying to do Excel.
In your
And
emergency reserve?
I've got current balance of 2.3 million. These are from April 28th in our operating reserves, 4.3 in our 90-day reserve.
Yeah, I don't have those numbers of what it is as of like
They
April.
add up to more than 6.9.
Okay. That's great.
Mhm.
But this is what it was during the rate study, and we're going to 2026. What we're projecting back when we were doing the rate study in 2023. Now I could pull up our annual update.
Just continue with your presentation.
Well, I want to make
But-
sure that I'm addressing your questions. So
My question is about reserves and reserve policy.
yes,
And are we, when we put in the red line and the dotted line,
yes.
what are we including in that? Because it would seem like there's a lot of different parts.
Okay.
Well, I'm trying to, it's a little opaque in the system, in the presentation, how those get broken out, what the origin, because I'm trying to figure out what we're measuring our progress against. And is that a valid measurement?
Okay, so let me pull up the 26 annual update, which is us refreshing everything to today. But again, I want to pinpoint it again. We're not accounting like a running total of what your reserve balance on a daily basis. We're looking at what is your reserve balance the start of the fiscal year, and what is your projected ending balance after expenses and everything for this year. Where would it end at the end of this fiscal year for June 30th? And I could give you those numbers, but I don't have a running total of what was our reserve balance as of April 30th? What is it as of May 19th? I don't have that data.
Well, let's go through the rest of your presentation and I could circle back on what I think we can do.
But if you wouldn't mind, I think just to close this loop on this, it'd be great if I could just give you what are the updated numbers, because they were refreshed based on us working in the last 30 days.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's do that. So I'm going to give you what are we projected to end in fiscal year 26. So in like 2 more months here, a month and a half. So for operating, we are expected, we expect to end at 4.2 million. For capital, we anticipate ending at 1.48 million. For rate stabilization, we expect it to end at $520,000. And for emergency, we expect to end at $3.16 million.
That's, excuse me, that's just water.
That's just water, yes. So then those combined would be 9.37 million is where we are as our projection to end of your unrestricted reserves, which include operating, capital, rate stabilization, and emergency. And we updated based on since you didn't adopt our recommended reserves, we updated based on what your current reserve policies are. And your current reserve policies that we went back and remodeled is 30 days of operating, which is substantially low. We wouldn't recommend that. Typically, operating reserve is a function of how often you recover revenue. So if you're a utility that bills monthly, we recommend 3 months. That's 90 days. If you're a utility that bills bi-monthly, it's recommended to have 120 days. So in either case, a minimum of 30 days is extremely low. Then your capital reserve is 1 year R&R. Your rate stabilization is the same as what we had, 10%. And then your emergency reserve, I mentioned before, typically is based on a % of your asset value. You don't have it that way. You have it as 90 days of operating expenses.
You and I have a different philosophy of what minimum should be.
And what is
Well, I
that?
mean, do you really think that there's a probability that 100% of our customers stop paying completely for 1 month?
No, that's
That's
not,
not
that's,
reasonable, is it?
that's not even, the, that doesn't correlate to say that doesn't mean that the reason why we have an operating reserve at a certain amount is because of customers not paying. The reason why you have a certain amount of reserves is based on your ongoing expenses that you have of your utility. We break it out into what is your operating expenses on a daily basis. And then you want to have, but your operating expenses don't incur evenly throughout the year as the same amount every single day. There's ebbs and flows of your expenses. So then that's why you want to have at least 30, more than 30 days. You want to have like 90 days. So then you could accommodate and absorb when you have expenses in 1 month that's significantly higher than what expenses are in another month. But we're not saying that it doesn't correlate that we want 30 days of operating because we need it in case no one pays the bill.
I
Those don't
understand
correlate.
operating cash. I'm talking about the
Yeah.
90 days.
The 90
And you
days
said
of,
that you didn't think 90 days, the amount we had budgeted was adequate. You thought it was lower than you recommended.
yes,
And
and
I'm
based
agreeing
on,
that I don't
GF
think that we agree.
based on GFOA standards, as well as AWA standards, as well as our work with many utilities throughout the state of California.
Okay, we could agree to disagree.
Okay. But we definitely are using industry standards of guidelines. And obviously, the other thing too is when I just mentioned to you right now, these are your current existing policies that I just laid out to you and those balances.
We had a discussion on reserve policies on April. We'll continue that.
Okay. So I'll continue with the update and then please continue to ask questions as I go through this presentation.
Before you go on,
Yes.
the dotted line on that, the plat that shows unrestricted reserves, and that has, it's a descending line going down to 25 million.
Yes.
So we would have to increase by 15 million to get there?
So we never really are trying to ever achieve your ideal target. The ideal target is really just to have the bandwidth to show, hey, you need to be above your minimum and you need to be within somewhere your balance somewhere in this range. If we get rid of that above target and you just have a minimum, then sometimes customers could perceive that, oh, wait, you collected too much. You're over your minimum requirement. You need to refund us. But this just gives you a bandwidth to know like your ending balance should be somewhere in between these two metrics. And the reason why that's the sloping going down is because that's a function of your capital. So as you notice in 26, there's a big increase in your fund. That's because back in our rate study, we anticipated you were going to issue bonds in 2026. And that's the influx of those bond proceeds going into your coffers. And then because you had huge capital expenses, but then your capital expenses spending was going to go down. So then that target comes down. It kind of follows your planning of what's going on in the future. All right, let me go to the next slide. Oh, I got it. So here is, again, with our 26 update. So this is everything being refreshed. We're looking at, are you generating positive net income on an annual basis? So the black trend line that is going across, that is your total revenue from your water utility. It's sloping up a little bit because we are modeling your adopted rate schedule. And then you have rates adopted through 28. So then after 28, it shows that's flat because you're gonna have to then, if you're gonna increase rates, you have to take board action to do so and go through Prop 218 proceedings. So this is showing, hey, based on your current adopted rates, you only have 2 more years, then you don't have any more increases on the books.
Just for clarity, the adopted rate is 7%. Is what you did this math with?
Yeah, the adopted rates for 27 and 28 are 7%. That's correct. And then the red dashed line is your operating expense. So that doesn't have any capital in it whatsoever. This is just your operating expenses only. And then we want to show that you have positive net income. So those gray bars is your net income, which is the difference between your revenues and your expenses that then could go towards capital spending and could go towards your maintaining healthy reserves. So you have very limited net income coming in with the rates that you approved during the public hearing.
And I think it's important to reiterate though, when we're talking about net income, you know,
Yes.
it's by design. Again, and this is one of the questions you raised, Director Garamendi, about that net. And so we do everything we can to keep operating costs as low as possible so that net is as big as possible, so that because what we know is the CIP is significantly underfunded. And so that's where we're just talking about the operating budget here. And that's why it looks like a net, but really it's just going to contribute to what is an underfunded CIP, and then also to the extent possible reserve fund contributions, you know, as needed. But really the main driver here is the CIP.
And that CIP money, you put it in a reserve account under asset replacements, correct?
Yeah, so this gets to, you also raised the question about transfers in and transfers out and the lack of clarity there. And Kelly and Kamiko and I have been talking about that, and we agree there's definitely some room for improvement there, because a lot of that is transferred out and it was shown as transfers out. I think that might be kind of a holdover from when we had the fixed portion of our rate that went to capital expenditures. And so it was transferred out into the capital R&R fund as a function of the rate structure. We've eliminated that
Component.
yeah, that constraint. So I think we can revisit the best way to do that, because a lot of times it's transferring out and then transferring back in to cover debt service, which is capital spending.
Understand. It would be very helpful if that, because it's really opaque.
Yeah, I think we can clean
It's
that up.
troublesome.
And then here's an update with your capital plan. So we updated and refreshed it. We want to make sure that you fully fund this. This shows that not only your capital spending plan, but also your funding sources. So we have debt financing, debt proceeds for fiscal year 26 and 27. That is reflected in the light purple. And then the orange is other funding such as grants and things of that sort. And then the dark purple is what is funded by pay-as-you-go by rates and your reserves. So the other thing that you also have is capacity fees, and those are only for specific projects, but you're able to transfer 3.3 million of capacity fees from 26 through 2030 to cover a portion of basically new developments, fair share cost for the improvements that are planned in your schedule. So then after we account for your
Those capacity fees are paid by developers.
by developers, that's
Or
correct.
Any new
We're not taking-
connection.
We're not guessing on any grant funds on this one.
Say that one more
We
time.
we didn't put any grant funding in here because we just don't have it.
The
That
only,
could happen.
the only grant funding we have in here is the grants that are secured.
Right.
Right. And then based on that information, after funding your operating expenses, after funding your full capital, then we look at how does that impact your reserve balances. So then this chart shows your reserve balances, and we want to try to be above your minimum requirement, but based on your scheduled rates and us updating your usage trends and the number of meters by size, your expenses, you're just below your minimum requirement. If we focus on 2028, the minimum requirement based on your existing policies of today, which we reverted back to, of the 30 days and the 90 days emergency and the 1 year R&R, you're at $13 million, and our projected balance for the end of 28 is 5.25 million. So then comparing these two, we want to look at where were we in projections during the rate study, 2028, and where were we now based on a refresh. So in 2028, we were going to be just below it, but based on the fact that capital has increased, In 23, our projected 5-year plan was 49.5 million. For 26 update, that same time period of 24 to 28 is 56.7 million. And as you mentioned, President, we aren't assuming grant funding for grants that are not secured yet. So it's possible that maybe this fund balance could have some replenishment if you secure some more grants by 2028.
On the second block of that, can you unpack the pink sections where it's going south? And the one on the right?
So the one on the right, 29 and 2030, that's when you don't have any rates adopted. So your 28 rates are the same for 29 and 2030. We are then having to, let me go back one. We then are funding, I went back to the capital plan, 29, 2030, because we don't have any secured grants. That is 100% funded by rates and your reserves. So then that is basically directly impacting reserves, because if I go back one more in terms of net income, this net income in 29 is roughly less than maybe like 2 million. In 2030 is about 1 million, but your capital spending in those 2 years are going to be 10 million and 12 million. So you only have enough net income to cover like 10% of that cost. So then the rest of that funding is hitting your reserves. And then that's how we show how is your utility looking in terms of financial outlook.
Yeah.
So that's how we connect those dots. We let it hit the reserve. So then we can say, do we need to adjust rates to then make sure that that reserve doesn't go negative and maintain a healthy balance? So then the recommendations would be continue to stay with the plan of implementing the adopted rates based on our projections. So fiscal year 28, as you mentioned, that's 7% increases, which was already reduced from what we recommended initially in a 2023 rate study. And then for fiscal year 28, we recommend that potentially you could also look at doing an updated rate study 1 year earlier. And if you do so, then the fiscal year 28 could be replaced with a new rate study with new rates that then could make sure that your reserves maintain a healthy balance and don't go negative. But that is all based on board decision, board policy, board discussion in terms of taking action. But my role here is to show where you are today, how you're looking in the future, and giving you information of how should we adjust our policy based on this new financial outlook. So that completes my discussion on water, but if you have more detailed questions, I'm more happy to stay on water and answer those questions for you.
Looking back at that, the plat number, but the water financial position capital.
Yes.
28, 29, 30.
Yes. I'm there.
Okay, and easier for me to go to the fiscal year 2029, because it looks like that there's about a $9 million shortfall.
Oh, in terms of net income?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's first statement.
Okay.
Somewhere around there.
Okay, so
I can actually.
A lot of this has a lot of sticker shock for me and for President here, who has more questions than I do, but I mean, that's fair amount of sticker shock. But what is 9 million?
So just
9
to
million
give you,
divided by 13,500 customers?
yeah, but you wouldn't be, your revenue would also be coming from usage as well. So you wouldn't recover that 9 million as a fixed charge to your customers. Maybe a portion of it would come from the fixed charges, but then you're also going to be recovering a portion of it from the actual usage rates as well.
It also, there's other, some of those, what we can tell you is some of those CIP projects that are in there, we're actively pursuing other sources of funding. We can't count on them yet because we haven't secured them. But there's a lot of work going into making sure that, the out years in that graph look more like the earlier years in that graph, not the dark purple all the way around. Cause that's essentially a pay as we go scenario where
Right.
we're paying for our CIP with cash, which is not, I don't think that would be advisable.
And we also aren't showing capacity fees because we also aren't projecting what we expecting, how many more new connections are coming online in 29 and 2030, because then that's just assumptions that we can't guarantee. But you're going to probably have more capacity fees coming in, from this year, next year, that builds up that fund that then could go towards any of those eligible projects, if there are any in those years, to also offset that cost.
So I think the point is I wouldn't try to extrapolate, any speculation about future rate increases based on that chart, because there's a lot of variables that are going to change between now and then.
Okay, but that very small infant,
So I have the number for you. It's 2.142 million is the amount of net income in 29 that could go towards capital spending.
okay,
So you have around 8 million, roughly 7.9 million of that's hitting your reserves right now. And again,
well, the relative sizes of the colors in that vertical bar aren't representative of those two, 2 million versus 8. It's like 500,000 versus 9
for
29 for 20.
so this is not showing net income coming in anywhere. This is the purple is net income and reserves combined. Basically, both those are from rate revenue. But if I go back one to the operating, this right here, that gray bar in 29, that is like the 2.142 million.
And this is, if you recall, so in the engineering committee, when we went through the 5-year update to the CIP, we had the column on the far right, the red column, which is the variance. We try to identify all the different sources of funding that we can use for different projects. And then in those out years, especially, we show the shortfall. We're funded for this year. We're funded for next year, I think through the end of this 5-year rate schedule. But we very quickly go red just because there's so many variables that we haven't resolved yet in those out years.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So now I'm going to switch to wastewater. So again, I want to start with where we were in 2023. The revenue adjustments we recommended were 14% with the final year at 3%. The board action at the public hearing was 12% for 3 years, 6% and 5%. So the upcoming adjustments for wastewater is a 6%, and then the following year 5% that's remaining. And then on this one, it wasn't showing that you're going to miss it that your minimum requirement by much. And again, these were our recommended minimum requirements, which we then reverted back to your existing because you kept what you had. So let me go there. So you have a substantial amount of net income in relation to this utility. Again, the black trend line is your rate, your total revenue with the rate increases of 27 and 28. 27, 28. The red dashed line is operating only, no capital expenses in this. So you have a good amount of net income, 2 million plus every year that could go towards capital spending and maintaining your reserves. Here's your capital plan now. You have quite a bit of different funding sources. So you have your debt financing, which is light purple, that shows in 26, 27, and 28. You also have capacity fees that are in that orange in 28, 29, and 30. And then that's funds already available today. It's just that you're using it in those outer years because that's when the projects that are eligible are showing up on your schedule. And then the light gray that's in the 2026, that's grants that you have available. So then now with that, you're actually doing better than what we were forecasting in 2023 And that's probably a function of the capacity fee revenue as well as the grants that you secured. So now your fund balance for 27 and 28 are above your minimum requirement. And again, this minimum requirement is reverting back to your existing policies that you stayed with and you didn't change to the recommended ones. Yes.
So we're doing this all and we didn't, without your suggested increases. 14, 14, 14, 14, and 3. We went 12, 12, 6, and 5.
That's correct. Yes. Right. And that's what I was going to. And but the other thing, Michael, is you also have reduced it as part of this update. So our rate study, which will show this comparison, I showed you in water, we showed your CIP went up. Well, now in wastewater, based on the rate study, your capital went down. We were expecting $34 million from fiscal year 24 to 28 in capital spending, but you're actually doing, based on today's update, $30 million. So it's really a function of the fact that you have reduced your capital spending that then basically allows you to have freed up money that then could go towards your reserves instead, because you're still recovering the same amount of rate revenue. Just that now that expense went away or it got pushed out, and then now it's in your reserve bucket instead. And that's making you be above your minimum requirement.
I think the important point there is it's deferred capital expenditures. So we can put it in reserve, but we're going to come up short in the very near future on capital spending. So that's where we can.
Because I would like to compare what came off the list. And like we're doing a lot of.
We are.
We could do all that, but I was not aware that things came off the plate. The question would be, why were they able to come off? That's a question that's going to be on this conversation.
Those were very difficult decisions, I can tell you. Pulling projects off that we as staff know are critical projects that we weren't funding.
What we achieved.
Right.
Okay. So the wastewater recommendation is still continue with the same implementation plan of adopting or moving forward with adopted rates. You're going to be meeting your minimum requirements. And then 29, 2030, as I mentioned with water, is outside the rate schedule. And then depending on what the district decides with the water utility, as I mentioned in our recommendations, you may want to consider looking at doing a rate study 1 year earlier. But this is what's good about doing annual updates. Is that it gives you a pulse of how you're performing and where you're at. Or you could you do another update next year. This only takes us 30 days. And then you determine at that point whether you need to pull the trigger. And if so, you may want to just then, even though wastewater is doing okay in terms of minimum requirement, you may want to just still keep them together in terms of timing with rate schedules. So then you don't have like a rate study 1 year for water and then incurring more cost the next year that could be not as efficient. And so the proposed rates, as I mentioned, would be or I guess I say the adopted rates that you had in public hearing would be the ones that you would continue moving forward with. And again, I appreciate the questions, and please, we're not trying to hide anything in any way. We actually even go through, as part of this process that I didn't mention, we go through the expenses line item by line item with district staff, and then we see anomalies because now we have multiple years of actuals. We highlight those and we talk to the staff about like, why did this go up so much? Why did this actually go down so much? You know, we don't have a rational reason. Sometimes it'd be like, oh, you know, that was a one-time cost, or we did some shifting in our personnel in terms of divisions. So we had reasons as to why or whatnot, or we make adjustments for having a better baseline based on actuals. So we went through all that process. So you can think of it as like we're kind of like a third eye reviewing and asking almost similar questions as yourself. One other question we had was, wait, did you not adopt the recommendations in our report? And the answer was no. So then we went back to our modeling, we reverted back to your existing policies from 23. And now that is in our model and it's reflected in our update.
My questions are, are mostly trying to figure out where we started this baseline from.
Yeah,
That's what you're measuring.
correct.
I'm not familiar. I was not here in 2023.
Okay.
And all I've got is the policies that are sitting in front of me today,
Yeah, yeah.
which don't, for the most part, don't describe a lot of the requirements that you use. And so I think if I understood that better, I'd know what number you started with, because the policies that we reviewed don't have that in there.
Yeah, so it's in our report that has been adopted as part of your administrative record. But it was 90 days instead of 30. But again, what my update is it went back to 30 is the red line. I'm not using 90 in our updates. I'm using the 30.
I'm just going to.
Yeah.
I mean, what we don't want to do is we do not want to be filling reserves. That's against our policy.
Right. If we don't need to, right?
That's
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah, so that's why we went back to making sure that what we're reflected in our annual update is the policies you have in place today, and our analysis is reflecting that. So with water, you're just below your existing policy recommendations, and with wastewater, you're above. And that's, both of those are a function of your capital spending.
Mentioned recommendation that we do earlier than anticipated rate study.
Well, you may just want to monitor it. I'm not saying you need to, but it's just something you need to have a pulse on, just to be aware.
Well, where I'm going with that is I heard a number of what we are paying for this intermediate review. My question is, if we do 2 reviews and get current information, will the 5-year rate study cost $150,000 like it did before?
No, it would not, but it would definitely be substantially more than this update, because when we do a cost service study, we have to do the full cost of service analysis. We have to do the administrative record. We have to make sure not only we're complying with Prop 218, but also we're complying with recent court cases that have come out. And the legal landscape is ever changing. There's quite a few court cases in relation to how you structure rates. Can you have tiers? Can you set rates based on conservation, things of that sort that you got to take into account? Right now, your rates are set. No one can challenge your rates. But once you update your rate study, then there's a window of time where your customers could challenge the rates, and that's 120 days. There's also procedures, new procedures as well, where you can limit that to less than 120 days. And then if you adopt the overlapping procedures, then customers that want to challenge you, they have to actually submit a protest. So you can't get challenged by someone that never submitted a protest. So that is one thing that is new if you layer the additional administrative procedures. And we recommend that with our clients now. That just started like a year ago.
So the updating the model, I think, is helpful and it's useful for us, but it doesn't replace a 5-year rate cost of
Right.
service study.
But you're just to clarify, you said these are set. The rate structure that we wanted to go on was set by the board, but we reset it every year, correct? The 7% needs to be adopted by the board.
No, yeah, you
6%?
just can't go over that amount.
It's a ceiling.
It's a ceiling. If you go over that amount,
Right.
you have to go through
Correct.
Prop 218. Yeah.
So-
Or if you change the methodology, so say you stay at 7%, but you say, you know what, I want more of the cost to go on the usage rate and less on the fixed charge, you have to redo a rate study because you're changing the methodology. So it's either if the increase is higher, or if you change the structure, it implements a Prop 218 noticing.
Right.
So again, there's no action items here. I don't believe there is, Michael.
No,
It's
this was a
This is
review
information.
to focus on the revenue side and update
Right.
the rate model and present that as we had committed to doing. And to Habib's point, also a very useful exercise to have a third set of expert eyes come in and pick it apart and question us on how we're doing everything. So
Which we did.
it's been a
Yeah.
useful exercise.
And
for sure.
I'll follow up and figure out where we started, because that way I can measure how far we've come.
Yeah, and
we'll-
please-
We'll break down the detail for you on that. Yeah.
And I didn't see the email come in. I was traveling yesterday and today, but if there's anything that we didn't address, I could reply back with answers for you.
Yeah, we can break that
I'll
down.
get all my questions out by the time we're done.
Yeah.
Okay.
Looks like
Alright.
the wastewater reserves are, you know, above the minimum requirements. Maybe we could borrow some of those for the water.
And if you borrow, then you just have to show that you're doing interfund loan and that it has to be paid back.
I'm just kidding.
Well,
And we have done that in the past.
agencies do
It went
that.
the other way.
Yeah.
And we've only, just resolved that. So the, but I think again, you know, the reason why that's showing that way is because there are capital projects that we haven't spent the money on yet, but that they're there.
Well, Jack, you weren't here, but I was, and I remember pretty clearly that we, you know, justified the rates that we adjusted downward on the basis of the promises that the reality that we cannot depend on unrealized funding from grants. We've demonstrated that we have been pretty successful on some grants. Otherwise, we'd be in worse shape than we are. But anyway, this is the least fun part of this job. Very, very definitely.
Right. Well, thanks so much.
I'll go
Thank
through
you.
Next year's budget and we'll compare it against your
Yeah.
numbers. Make sure everything's copacetic.
Thank you, Habib.
Well, okay. Do you have any additional questions?
Nope.
Okay, do we have any comments, public comments on this presentation?
Good afternoon, directors. Mike Rogers from Valley Springs.
Hello, Michael.
My question is with regard to the 23 rate study and how the business was structured at that time, which included the hydro business. And then later, maybe 18 months ago, you decided to detach the hydro business from water and wastewater. So my question for the consultant would be, did the analysis in 23 include those revenues? I realize it's not nearly as large as an enterprise as water and wastewater is, but because they were, you know, bundled together at the time, I assume, maybe incorrectly, that the analysis was based on revenues from that business as well. And so when you do a new analysis, you're not kind of comparing apples with oranges because you don't have the revenues and expenses from the hydro business bundled into this analysis.
So quick response on that. It is broken apart separately in the budget now. The vast majority of the hydro revenue is passed through to cover expenses. So of the net revenue that's there, it's still predominantly used to fund the Water Resources Department, which is what it was used historically for as well. So those expenses have evolved over time, but that's still predominantly what the net revenue from hydro is being used.
So you have a reserve fund for water rights. Is that what you're referring to?
No, that's separate and that remains in water. The hydro reserve has a separate unrestricted reserve fund.
Sure. But it also generates net income.
The hydro
That
fund does.
Not
yes.
all of the net income goes to reserves, or does it?
No, it, like I said, predominantly goes to fund our Water Resources Department, which is what it historically was used for as well. It's just broken out differently.
So you
now.
think any net income would not have a material effect from hydro, would not have a material effect on this analysis?
I don't think it really, I think the creation of the hydro enterprise doesn't have a huge effect on this. It's still, the net revenue from hydro is still funding, for the most part,
My
the same stuff that it
recollection-
was funding before, right? So the water resources effort.
My recollection is that the net revenue was somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million
Yeah,
a
that's
year. So
That's
it's,
right.
and so out of that $500,000 to $1 million a year, how much are you contributing then to the reserves? The 100%?
No, that hasn't, the hydro reserve fund was seeded with an unrestricted settlement. Basically, none of the revenue goes into that. We don't put hydro revenue into the hydro reserve. The net revenue is spent on water resources.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments?
Good afternoon, directors. My name is Francisco de la Cruz. I'm speaking today as a neighbor, a steward of the community, and an executive systems consultant. I'm going to present a unified consolidated analysis on behalf of the Ratepayer Transparency and Accountability Group. If you look at a rigorous fiscal evaluation of the proposed fiscal 26-27 budget packets, it documents that the district's actual operational and treasury baselines have experienced a significant structural divergence from the long-term assumptions modeled in the 2023 cost of service study. To maintain strict administrative alignment with Proposition 218 cost of service mandates, we are submitting an analytical framework that supports a structured fiduciary pause on the scheduled July rate step based on 3 unreconciled ledger realities. And all of those are documented for you here. I'll just cover the third point of the 3 that we were going to discuss, which involves fiduciary sequencing. At your May 12th meeting, the engineering committee responsibly authorized over $53,000 for an engineering firm to perform a formal data gap analysis, noting that project prioritization currently relies heavily on localized staff knowledge rather than a structured asset management framework. Because the final delivery of that roadmap has experienced an administrative extension into summer months, the empirical data required to validate our tier through tier 3 capital projects is only currently in progress. Consequently, as documented on page 43 of the budget package, we are currently maintaining a $13,912,000 in unexpended carried over ratepayer cash. Directors, moving forward with a permanent rate resolution while a $13.9 million capital carry forward remains unexpended, an unbudgeted $16.8 million interest stabilization cushion exists from the interest that you've earned on your investments, and the asset roadmap is incomplete, which prevents the board from basing consumer rates on verified project data. We are presenting this committee with a standard professional governance mechanism, a fiduciary pause.
Francisco, if I could interrupt you for 1 second. Typically, we restrict these comments to 3 minutes.
Got 16 seconds left.
Well, I was going to give you more if you needed. Are there other people that are going to speak here today? Okay, continue.
Okay. So we're presenting this committee with a standard professional governance mechanism, a fiduciary pause. By pausing the implementation of the scheduled July rate step, this committee provides the engineering team the necessary space to complete the roadmap, letting the data catch up with the timeline so that we can make informed, united decision for the future of Calaveras County. I have compiled our complete updated forensic analysis folder for the official administrative record, and I will leave it with you. Thank you.
You have another minute if you want.
Yeah, I could go back to a rigorous, let's see, look at pages 41 and 40 on Schedule C1. We have 37.1 million in active liquid reserves, and embedded within the broader total corporate portfolio, we have nearly $70 million. Furthermore, page 42 documents that non-operating interest subaccounts Fund 308 and Fund 508, which I'm sure you're familiar with, hold a combined $16.82 million in accumulated liquidity, driven by persistent macroeconomic high yield interest rates. These unbudgeted revenue function as real-time fiscal stabilization fund. So there's money in the savings accounts. There's money in reserves. There's all kinds of money that far exceeds the 2-point-something million dollar rate increase that you all are about to approve for July. I heartily encourage you, take a pause, get the roadmap built. Then we can really be talking about real data, not our best. I'm sure it's the best they can come up with, but if you don't have reliable frameworks to assess the status of your assets, then we're being reactive more than we are being proactive. And that's expensive. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else wishing to discuss this item? Anyone online?
Go online.
Michael, I remember something that happened maybe a year and a half or 2 years ago where we got the bad news that all of the, or at least a large portion of the interest we were earning on those deposited funds was disqualified, or we weren't able to.
No, I mean, I think, first of all, I think it is important to point out that a lot of what those reserve funds are loan proceeds that are already spent essentially on capital projects, and unrestricted reserves for expansion funds for each service area that can only be spent on capital projects in those service areas. And that's the yellow in one of those graphs that Habib was showing is what we're spending those funds. We're allocating those funds in future fiscal years. So, to put towards infrastructure projects. So what I think you're referring to is the arbitrage on the interest rates we're earning on loan proceeds.
Yes.
The interest rates we were earning exceeded the interest rates we owe. Right. So we had to pay taxes on that.
Oh, okay. It was just simply that we were taxed on that differential. Okay, we didn't have to refund anything. Okay.
What's the action item here?
No, this was just a report, and then I think that concludes that item.
Okay.
One question on that item, though. Would you like us to bring Habib back for the full board to present this item as well?
I think it would be.
Let us know.
Yeah,
maybe I figure out what which is in. I don't know.
Understood.
Maybe we get through the budget presentation. We'll because I think we can probably address most of that in the budget presentation for the full board as well. But we can bring the IB team back as well if we need to.
I lives in Keystone
Keystone?
area.
Oh,
Okay. I would encourage any of the board members who are not physically attending here today, they had to review this portion of the recorded version of our meeting here. It would be instructive to them, I think. Okay, item 3B, discussion direction regarding the fiscal year 2026-27 draft operating and revised capital improvements programs. We have this for Director of Administrative Services, Kelly.
you, Director Thomas. So today we're just going to be running through our budget for fiscal year 26-27 draft budget. So this budget includes several updates, including the next phase on the rate plan for water and wastewater. We're focusing on eliminating operating deficits and restoring fund balances and reserve levels. This provides funding for water and wastewater capital improvement programs, which you understand are extremely important to the district, as we have many deferred projects that we need to accomplish. Last year, the board allowed us to revise the fund structure for water, wastewater, and adding in hydro. We've continued with that process moving into this year. Our budget assumptions include the idea that we are going to proceed with the rate increase of 7% for water and 6% for sewer. That was just how we assembled the budget accordingly, as a baseline to move forward. Fund summary, again, we've got the budgets all separated out. 300 is water, 400 is hydro, and 500 is sewer, wastewater. Challenges, as you're aware, the rate study showed that water revenues were not sufficient to support water operations, which would lead to structural deficits. As Habib went through and showed us moving through the rate study, we are trending in that direction if something's not done in the future. Fund balances for wastewater are looking better than was projected originally. So as of June 30th, 2025, we were at a negative 613,000. That is now projected to be a positive 610 at the end of next fiscal year. What else can I talk about? The 5-year rate plan anticipated balanced budgets, but as we know, we may have come off the timeline a little bit. So we need to take a look and get it going back in the right direction.
I could ask a quick question on
Of
that.
course, sir.
We have here a bullet item on your slide. Go back one slide if you would.
Of course.
What the, I got here. Sorry, I'm wearing my wrong glasses. The budget, the wastewater fund balance went way down. I assume that that was because, excuse me, water fund way down. That was because we had the project going on, right? Yeah, I'm sorry. My questions were for something else.
Okay. Do my best to answer anything you ask. We have a bit of a typo on this spreadsheet here. It looks like forest thinning line number 12 was not carried across. So I wanted to make sure you knew that. We will correct that for the next version.
Can I ask a question?
Mhm.
The special projects, we have revenue going into new revenue going into special projects. Reserve account.
Budgeted revenues. Yes.
I can
So
speak to that, Kelly, if you.
Oh, Kamiko, yes, thank you. I'm sorry, and I meant to introduce Kamiko from Eide Bailey. Kamiko was absolutely instrumental in the preparation of this budget. I honestly could not have done it without her. So please, Kamiko, tell
Yeah,
us.
So
so
what are we increasing the special
That is
projects reserve fund
15%
from?
of the property tax revenues go directly to the special projects fund every year
Is that by policy or is that just by practice?
By policy.
by policy.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, moving on. Fund balance for sewer. Nothing really to mention in that except for the projected fund balance of 11 million at the end of the fiscal year. Gonna keep going through these.
Yeah,
I'd-
I just thought up just.
Yes, please, sir.
Same thing for the sewer fund. 15% goes to the special projects fund.
Correct.
That's correct. Yes. And I will show you that policy, I promise. All right. Hydropower, we've got, we do have a transfers out for that, or I'm sorry, transfers in. Kamiko, can you speak to that line item? We made the decision to
Yeah.
take funds from the reserve.
Yeah, I actually was realizing I forgot to mention that when in the last comment to Mike Rogers' question on hydro, not only are we not putting net revenue in reserve this year, we're actually drawing from the reserve to spend to supplement water resources expenditures because we're spending more on relicensing now than we were historically. And we don't want that to hit the water and wastewater fund. So we're actually pulling from that reserve. That reserve will go down, at least based on this draft budget. We'll see how this all plays out, but we're cautious about that.
Yeah, we want to make sure we're insulating the water and wastewater funds. So. Alrighty, getting into the operating budget, total sources of revenue, a total 41.5 million, and the uses total 40.5 million. And that's for the combined, all three budgets. Here's your pie charts, which show,
It's got us having a roughly net increase 3.4 to 4%
correct, over the,
overall
all
cost
of the
increase.
budgets.
across the board.
Yes, sir.
Well, all of the operating.
Operating
budgets,
budget.
Right,
Yeah.
that doesn't include.
Not hydro.
It, I think, does include hydro, it doesn't include capital.
You're absolutely right. Sorry, sir.
Mhm.
Yes.
Except for the capital projects transfers out.
Yeah, so it includes that, but not the full CIP budget.
It's in
That's right.
there.
Because that's kind of a wash. A lot of that goes to debt service, which is.
Separate reserve. We have a separate reserve. for
No,
debt
that's,
service.
actually, Kamiko, correct me if I'm wrong, that is paid out of the operating budget.
The debt
Correct.
service?
Yeah,
Yes.
Yes.
that's why we think we should get rid of this transfer in, transfer out, or at least restructure it so it's clearer. Because those are capital expenditures that we just, for the most part, I think we end up spending on debt service. And then if there's surplus, it can go to fund the capital R&R reserve, which we use for capital projects. But it doesn't sit in a reserve.
We need to clean this up.
Yeah.
Yes, we agree.
Moving on to the pie chart. Everybody loves a pie chart. Sewer operating budget. So if you look at we've got the percentage increase and decrease over the prior year for revenues, 12.1 million, which is an increase of 3.4 for uses, salaries and benefits, everything. We're at 11.3 million, and that's a 3.3% increase over the prior year.
We have an operating revenue at 5.8%, and we're scheduled to, these budgets were done with 6 and 7%. So what's the difference?
When you get into the detail, you can see that some of the revenues were lower. So, Kamiko, please step in any moment.
Yeah, of course. The
the
operating
non-
revenue is made up of multiple line items. So you have things like, water sales for fire hydrants, inspection fees. So as those fluctuate, that is going to affect that total percentage shown there. But for the rate revenues, we are increasing that by the 7%.
Yeah, so rates are the majority, like it's a primary source of revenue, but there's a lot of other sources of revenue that will fluctuate.
A little less than 6%.
Yep, as we get into the detail, the full budget details, you'll see all of the ins and outs, which are a little bit, a very complex budget, as you can imagine.
Complex.
Easy peasy. Let's see, we did all those already. All right, did that. Hydropower pie chart. And then operating budget by department.
Why do we think we're getting a 29% increase in operating in hydropower?
In
Of expenses, yes. And those are attributed to the relicensing effort for the hydropower for our Collierville and the North Fork project. So they're
that's
anticipating.
going to go up even more in
Yeah, I know.
subsequent fiscal year.
We've talked about that.
Going to be a pretty big lift. So that operating budget by department. So total of all of the budgets are 33,924,000. That's
Can I ask a question?
Mhm.
What is Water Resources getting at $3.1 million for services and supplies? Two people in that shop?
The
What is that?
majority of that is relicensing. That's the big increase this year for that. That's where that relicensing expenditure is.
You've got to get a line item for that. That's
Yeah.
just- We're pulling it from all these budgets and it's hard to see.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
And non-departmental, we got a $2.3 million service and supplies. We got $5.4 million. Are those about?
moving into payroll.
Excuse me. I had a question.
Yes.
Sorry.
Operating budget by department slide. Below water resources, 3.1 million for relicensing. We've got a $2.3 million non-departmental charge.
That is for all of the debt services, Miko?
So there are
And
non-departmental expenses. There is a portion of the unfunded accrued liability that flows in there, but that it falls under salaries and benefits. But there are expenses related to like computer licenses and maintenance contracts. The biggest one there is retiree health costs at 1.4 million. And then insurance costs are almost 500,000. So that makes up that 2.3.
Thank you.
Payroll, we are at 14.9 million for payroll. 9.3 makes up salaries and wages, and benefits are 5.6 million. Capital outlay, total cost of 1.4 million. This is a list that was pared down quite a bit. There were many more requests that were made by several divisions, particularly operations, and we had some hard choices to make. We did add one vehicle to the lease program, hoping that we'll be able to get that one. Everything else, I think, Michael, please correct me if I'm wrong. I think the cameras were budgeted last year as well, or did those end up coming off the request?
I
think they might be a rebudget. Prior
I'd
year.
have to go back and look. I'm not
Okay.
sure. I don't think we budgeted for those
Oh,
last year.
okay. Maybe different,
Those are-
might have been different locations. I might be mistaken.
Your predecessor, Jeff, on his way out, I asked him what were the questions I should always ask.
Yes.
And he suggested to me, I ask you, what's not in this budget?
Gosh.
Yeah.
Damon?
Yeah. I mean, I can tell you the one big ticket item that is not in this budget is a VACON truck.
Yeah.
So we've purchased a couple of those over the last 7 years. We have one really old one that is still keeping it going up on the pass. I think it's up on the pass, right?
That was going to be a $600,000 ask.
We
I
bought one
believe.
of those.
Oh.
We're familiar with the machine.
And then, yeah, what else did we?
We also had filter rehabs.
Mhm.
So we, the West Point filter, that was the original filter that's now the backup, needs to be rehabilitated, and we have one less filter at the gym. Also capital outlay.
Are they critical at this moment?
Not at this moment. We just can't let that West Point filter get away from us because we only have two.
Right.
You know, Jenny Lind, we have 6. So it's just about housekeeping.
Anything else we're missing in here?
There's equipment. We're always asking for equipment. There was additional skid steer requests. As you can imagine, you know, crews are always asking for needing equipment. Tools and equipment mostly.
And then there were a couple of items, you know, Valsito SCADA and La Contenta, that airline that we're working to see if we have room in the budget this year to actually knock those things out. Because they are critical items, but we're trying to be lean in this capital outlay budget.
Damon, as I was driving in this afternoon, I saw a water truck filling at this fill station out here, and the logo on the side of the tank was shared equipment. Do you know anything about that?
I'm not sure about shared equipment.
Could you have Mike Crank look into that?
Absolutely.
The thought occurred to me is, you know, we have a couple of water districts here in town that maybe we could share a dump truck or share a water truck or something along those
Yeah.
lines. So
Definitely we'll look into it.
Get the phone number off the side.
I was trying to stay in the middle of the
You're trying not to
street.
get hit or get wet.
And then some of these other items, I don't know if you want to get into detail. The telemetry for diesel tanks, that's one that we've kicked around in the past. We've pushed it off before. It really came to came into focus again for us this year. It has in the past as well. But when we have big snow events and we can't get to our generators, it's hard. We can predict based on history, how long those gas tanks are going to last us, but it changes depending on load and depending on the conditions. So it's a little bit of a guessing game as to how much runtime we have on those generators to some degree. And sometimes we, like this last year, we put out a pretty significant work effort to get to one of our generators, just because of that uncertainty and because of how the implications of it running dry are, a whole lot of customers are out of water. And so having eyes on those diesel fuel tanks, I think would be really beneficial for us operationally and save cost in the long run from the heavy lift it can be getting to those generators when, maybe we could have waited another day or two, maybe they would have got the power back on. But if we don't have eyes on it, we don't want to run the risk of losing water for all those customers.
Yep.
Is that something that could be an add-on to the existing SCADA system that's?
Absolutely. We can incorporate that information in SCADA. Yep. Absolutely. And to add to what Michael was saying, we do have a document that calculates generator ops at half load. So like he also indicated, when you're running through a blizzard or you have extenuating circumstances, you just don't know how hard those pieces of equipment are working. And so if you can't see them, then that becomes the critical work effort. And when you're in a situation like that, it's really hard to understand if you're focusing your attention in the proper way, because you just simply can't see what's going on. This came up actually in 2021 too. Michael and I were in the EOC. There was another issue associated with storms and access on the pass, and we had to work with the county of PG&E to get access so we could get to a generator so we could refuel it. And then, kind of to acknowledge what Michael is doing here with this capital outlay, Connor's main generator, this is one of our oldest generators, and this lift station conveys sewage from the lower end of Copper Cove, so Connor Estates, Poker Flat, all the way down O'Burns Ferry to what's called the Lower Cross Country lift station. So it's a critical generator for us. Push cams, those are related to sewer systems. So it's always important that our folks can see what's going on through a sewer lateral. Trailer mounted generators, this is another highlight in emergencies. We need to be able to jockey power back and forth depending on which system went out. And in case of the February Snowmageddon, we lost a turbo on our Big Trees 1 generator. And so we had to think about how to power that. Luckily, we were able to calculate the amount of oil it was going to blow. So we could operate it for a couple hours at a time. And we had a pan capturing the oil so we could replenish the oil because the turbo had blown out. We could keep it alive. But in a situation like that, you would love to be able to just put a trailer mounted there and say, okay, we've addressed that issue. We'll fix that generator when the dust clears. But that's what those are all about. And then UV system improvements. This is for La Quintana. And this is really how we ensure that the treated wastewater is compliant. So this UV disinfects the treated wastewater. So that's why that's on there too. So really, these are, all of the capital outlay requests are prudent, but these are particularly focused around compliance and ensuring operations in emergencies.
And that SCADA replacement, if we can make it work this fiscal, it may come off.
Exactly. Yeah. If you guys can make that work this fiscal, that would be a huge help for all of us.
Thank you very much, Tim.
One-
Help me under,
Just while you're there, Damon, the push camera item, I recall not too many months ago, we allocated money to buy a whole truck, very sophisticated truck, that one of the arguments for doing it was there were cameras that could crawl through the pipes. What's the difference between a crawling camera and a pushing camera?
The pushing camera can go in a smaller pipe, so like a clean out or a 2-inch sewer line, and the crawling camera can go 4, 6, 8-inch. So that's really focused on the sewer main, and this would be laterals and any of the small kind of odd pieces of or like connections from a lift station to a home, any clean out from a home. Like if we don't know if it's a customer issue or a district issue, That's where these come into play. These push cams.
Wouldn't that push camera require a high pressure water jet to actually kind of pull it through?
Not for these. These are literally just push cams. So like what Director Thomas is referring to is generally when you CCTV or use a camera to inspect a sewer main, you've cleaned it first. And we do have basically a hydro cleaning trailer that we use. So we'll go in and clean the sewer main, then inspect it with the camera that has wheels on it called a tractor. But this is, you're on a customer call, you're not sure what's going on with the septic tank, and you need to look at a camera and run a line through a small 2-inch, and you're not even sure where it's going. It's those kinds of situations. We really struggle to understand what's going on with situations like that. And they have a lifespan too. 5 years ago, we purchased a couple push cams and they last a certain amount of time, and they're put into some tough conditions day in, day out.
I interrupted you. Go ahead.
I interrupted you. I'm sorry, Russ. What is the problem with our audio system in this room that requires
Yeah.
$32,000?
I was going to highlight that one too, because I think we've circled back with Dylan to see if we can bring that number down. We do have some audio system issues in here, especially it comes up sometimes in board meetings. It comes up a lot more when we have larger group meetings here, where we're meeting with other agencies or other boards or stakeholder meetings. Our hybrid capabilities in here are limited, but we're gonna see if, I know that is already down significantly from the first estimate that he got, but we'll see what we can do on that front too. And then the security cameras are both, those are both for recommendations from our emergency response plans, where we're never going to have security cameras at all of our facilities. We just have too many facilities spread throughout the county. But these are really targeting sites where we've had vehicles stolen before, we've had vandalism before. These are kind of the high priority sites, and hope to be able to address that.
All for security. Dylan seems like a decent fellow. I'm sure he knows his business. This is the nicest boardroom I've ever served in. So interesting to hear it was insufficient.
I think we were getting quite a bit of feedback from the public that they were having trouble hearing us. So I think we started looking into some new microphones and different things. So
It works well if you're here in the room, if you're doing hybrid, if you're online, if you're trying to accommodate a lot of speakers who aren't sitting in front of a microphone. There's other situations that are challenging.
we'll take another look at it though. We can do. Right. Debt service budget. So for 26-27, we're looking at $4.4 million in debt service payments. You'll see that the budget in 25-26 was 4.25. So we had the one loan that just came online this last year. So since we have an increase in that line item. Okay. These next few slides, I'm not even going to go into them very much, as Habib did such a great job with going through the rate study. It would basically be just reiterating a lot of the things that he covered. So if you don't mind, I'm going to pass through those. Looking at revenues for all three budget units, we're looking at a total of 41.49 million for revenues. Expenditures are at 40.56 million. And looking at the CIP. So we adopted the CIP a couple months ago. And since that time, we've revisited it and have made some changes. Unfortunately for this meeting, I was unable to do a comparison between what was adopted and what we're proposing now. But I'm committed for the next board meeting to make sure that you can see all of the changes that have occurred from one to the other. So the 26-27, we did realign some of the loan proceeds for those projects, the Lake Tulloch Intertie and the Copper Cove Tank Transmission Pipeline. as well as the Jenny Lynn A to B transmission line. So I wanted to make sure I pointed those out, that there will be a comparison forthcoming on those.
That will fill in the variance column.
Exactly. Well, if there is, I think on
There's
those,
not.
I think we're whole on those. The same thing with wastewater. There were a few minor changes to that as well. And I
These
think-
changes are all accounted for in the
Yep.
budget that follows.
Yes, correct. And then, so for next steps, we're going to incorporate any comments and directions you provide us today. Bring the item back to the board on the 27th for proposed budget. And then hopefully complete adoption for June 10th. If you have any questions, the draft budget is in your packet with all of the details on all of the budget items. Anyone has any questions?
I
I'm
have
happy to
questions,
answer.
Kelly, but I also just hit the wrong button on my computer.
Of course.
Pilot error.
Absolutely operator error.
While he's looking, and I have a question for you, Kelly. This proposed budget adoption on June 10th, is that, and I assume that is predicated on the implementation of the 7% increase that we're.
Currently, that's the assumption we're working with, unless we receive additional direction from your board next week. I would imagine we
Yeah.
would continue with that.
The date isn't necessarily tied to that. That's what's included in the draft budget. But yeah.
Sorry, Kelly.
Okay.
My question as I dig into the budget are, go to the page district-wide budget detail.
You have a page, there's no page number?
Page 70 online. It is,
What, do you know what schedule?
yes, it's the draft budget district-wide budget detail. Ends with the line. Actually, it's the first one after you get off your bar graphs. Just keep scrolling down. On to the next page.
Okay, district-wide budget detail, sure. Schedule A2,
I don't see a schedule on there, but assume so.
up at the top in the gray.
Mine doesn't have a schedule on it. It just says Calaveras County Water District, district-wide budget summary. It's the next page of the
We have it on
packet.
here?
Schedule A2 right here.
Okay,
Oh, we
yes.
have it.
I will say that's it. If you go down to line 188.
Total expenses?
Hmm?
Yes, sir.
3.4%.
Yes,
That's our increase
yes, yes,
and includes debt service.
correct.
Right.
Does not include capital, though.
Under the wastewater fund budget detail, same document, just the next one down. Total expenses, line item 170.
Yes,
Okay, you've got total expenses at 3.3%.
yes, sir.
But, and you say this doesn't include capital?
Except for the debt service.
It has, thank you.
Atcon truck on there.
Capital, those are capital outlay, but not capital projects. So the CIP budget is adopted separately from the operations budget.
Right, but the operations pay for the CIP, right?
Yes. That's why when we say the total, our total expenditures are more than the 3.3 and the 3.4, that's because we are talking about including the CIP projects.
CIP projects, most of these are funded, a lot of these are funded by loans, right?
A lot of different sources,
Right,
but
they're all
some-
listed here.
some of it is cash from the capital R&R fund as much as we can, move into that fund, we can use it for capital projects.
We're transferring out capital projects out of this. They're total under line item 152. Right?
Yes.
So we are. It says
Yeah,
right
so
there,
that,
capital projects. Transfer out.
right. So but that is showing the expenditure increase. But it doesn't actually reflect the cash need in the CIP. That makes sense. So we're still, we still don't have enough revenue for the projects we need to build. Even though the operating budget right now is only showing that 3.3% increase.
You're transferring out for capital projects. That it didn't include it, but it looks like it does.
So it's included in the transfer out. It's not, but it's not reflective of what the revenue need is for the CIP. Because that's what I mean by it's. I think it's a little bit incomplete to just focus on that number because it doesn't tell the story of how much revenue we actually need.
I think partially I'm saying it incorrectly. So if I understand your question.
Yeah.
President Garamendi. In the regard that we are including the capital transfers out, when you look at the overall, if we extracted that piece out, which is the way I'm kind of looking at it, I mean, I'm going to present it to you that way the next time. Kamiko, I think Kamiko also will understand what I'm saying. It's the net difference is the 3.3%, but if we didn't consider the capital portion of it, the change would be higher of operating costs. So if you go through and you look at the detail on each section, for example, the transfers in is a difference of a negative 30.3% over last year. We have revenue, the change in revenue from year over year. Well, it's an increase, and it's an increase of $544,000 year over year for operating revenue in the wastewater. I'm just looking at wastewater, for example. It's not telling the story that you're looking to get out of it. And I think if we show it a different way and do the transfers differently, I know it's bugging you that we're doing it the way they're doing it. It's a continuation of what was happening last year. I think it can be done better, and to make it very clear and transparent, we can adjust the way the reporting is.
Generally takes a couple of years for a board member to memorize. the budget.
I've been here 5 minutes, so I know what you're talking about.
I'm willing to, let's sit down and let's talk
Mhm.
about how we fund the capital projects,
Yes.
how that money flows, how that's reflected in our real budget.
Yes.
I'd be stuff that's interesting, but this is the real.
Well,
Yeah.
and the CIP is in this regard commingled in with operating, and that, to me, that should be separate. Where I come from, it was always two independent, completely separate budgets. Even if money flowed between the two, it was still two separate budgets. And this kind of merges the two together. So I think, Michael, you look like you want to say something.
Well, I mean, I think they're separate, but it could certainly be clarified. I think there's definitely room for improvement here that I think the questions are hopeful. It helps us focus in on where we can simplify it.
Mhm.
And so there's some, I think we can clear that up a
Yeah,
little
I
bit.
think there's some different totals that we can show you that will clarify
I mean,
the percentages.
this is not a bad budget. You
No,
guys have
no,
done
no,
a very good job of budgeting, putting things together. I'm just trying to understand it.
Yes.
Nothing,
And I
broken
think
here,
Jeff
it's understandable.
did, the format that we're using, Kamiko did a lot of work to even make it better. And I think there's still more that can be done. Jeff had a great system that he was using, and I think we can improve upon that even more. So give us a little bit of time and we'll work through it. I think we were at the end of the
we get
slide.
down to the budget budget summary by department. And when you look at all this, it has a 1.9, you didn't include the percentage increases, but I did,
Yes.
1.9%. We could go down and talk about the fund balance analysis draft budget, which is if you keep scrolling down. This is page 19, looks like. And I think I understand, you know, this whether special projects are generating revenue. Again, if they're generating revenue based upon, as Kamiko said, that 15% fee top of it. I guess in Calaveras, anytime watch duty goes off, everybody
Mhm.
is allowed to look at their watch. Capital R&R water. We've got it on line 14. We've got balance of 5.684 is what you're projecting in the last year. But if you go up to asset replacement, which is line 4,
Mm-hmm.
which I believe is one of our reserve funds, right?
Asset replacement on line 6.
Asset replacement has, what is it? A couple $1 million in there.
For water.
Yeah.
Um, I'm seeing asset replacement has 0.
Emergency reserve has a 4 million.
I've got asset, well, this is as of the 25th. This is from your presentation
Mhm.
on the 28th. It says the actual water fund had $4.2 million in it.
I'm going to have to defer to Kamiko. Kamiko, are you there? I think when we developed that report, I think we learned more after we did that report about where those apportionments should be placed. So I think the final version of the budget has everything in the proper reserve.
That's going to make a significant difference to your numbers here.
Mm-hmm.
So we just supposed to ignore this right now?
I mean, I would say let's review it and make sure we've got everything correct in the right spots. And I'll go back through the presentation that we did and see where we may have missed and where we hit it right.
4.2 million.
Yeah.
let's find it.
I think when you look at all of the amounts, I think they may have been apportioned to other funds, but let me
Same
follow
thing
up on
goes for
that.
the next one.
Kamiko, are you tracking that? That sounds like the operating emergency reserve.
Yeah, I think it's that, or if it was the combination of the water rates and CIP cash flow, that adds up to 4.2 right there.
Mhm.
There's operating reserve is listed here. This is just asset replacement, that reserve fund.
Unless that's referencing the capital R&R. I'm not sure. We'll have to look into that one.
Again, special projects, we need to discuss that as a board.
Mm-hmm.
And capital R&R is on this
Yes.
list.
Right. That's definitely a working fund, right? So that's where
Right.
those
So
transfers
is
are.
it R&R, is it asset replacement?
Sorry, what's that?
So I guess, are we mixing up R&R and asset replacement?
I don't believe so.
I don't think so. Those are two different funds.
The numbers look similar. Close enough that it's making me think.
Okay, we'll
Well-
double check.
Yes,
Please do.
absolutely.
All right, that's all I had.
Kelly, you may recall that I've requested some way of identifying, I'm looking at the debt service numbers. You have 1.439 million projected proposed budget expenditures, but we just have these loan balances and water reserve loan, but no expiration date.
We incorporated that into the monthly report. So you'll see when we get to the monthly report, we have a tracking mechanism for how many years left in each of those projects. So hopefully you'll like that. Yeah.
Okay, do we have any questions?
Just one comment before we move on. I don't think it was brought up yet, but another part of this conversation is debt service coverage calculations.
you.
So for water, with the current budget in front of you, the debt service coverage is 1.95. For wastewater, it's 2.59. So just wanted to share that transparently.
Is that good or bad?
Minimum debt service coverage is 1.25. So without any rate increases, that would drop down to 1.5 for water and then 2.19 for wastewater.
We're okay.
That's cutting it pretty close.
Very close.
Well,
Alright.
and then that compounds over time, right? So it'll get more challenging in out years.
All right, any other questions? Victor? All right, let's open this up for comments from the public.
Thank you, Francisco de la Cruz. Well, as evidenced by the questions that we've all heard, it's not a straightforward thing to understand the 100 some odd pages on a budget very easily. Even with plenty of time, it still can overwhelm you. We're trying to make it easier for our ratepayers to understand what's going on, especially in CIP. We're trying to group CIP projects into 3 tiers. Tier 1 being for safety, regulatory, or remaining useful life reasons, the assets wearing out. Tier 2 would be for leak remediation, focusing on reducing NRW, improving ILI, and improving INI. Tier 3 would be for growth or other strategic reasons. We only have 3 types of CIP projects to grab and hopefully help the public understand what they're paying for. Also, if it would be possible to take advantage of the tools that are available to us today to make more simpler, easier to understand graphics of the budget. The circles help, the pie charts help, but what really happens in a budget situation is what's going on over time? How is the budget changing over time? Are we getting better or are we getting worse? Are we spending more to get the same output or spending less to get the same output? The only way you can do that is trends. And you've done that by adding the percentage change. But when I was responsible for results for Pacific Bell, we looked at percent change month over month and percent change same period year over year. We'd make decisions using that data in addition to other data. And lastly, when I was responsible for projects, we used to have a project life cycle that made it easy to understand very quickly in one picture what status they were in. Were they in analysis? Were they being designed? Were they actually being constructed and tested? Or are they system testing? And then are they released? I have no way of knowing where your projects are by looking at your CIP data. And it would be extremely helpful to know, hey, don't even worry about this. They haven't even finished the design yet. That's not going to help. The heavy dollars aren't going to hit until they start constructing. So I'd ask you to look at the possibility of making the financial results easy to understand. A dashboard on your website so you don't have to worry about trying to explain it here all the time would be a significant help. Thank you.
Thank you, Francisco. All good recommendations. Anyone else from the public want to make a comment?
Go
Okay.
for one.
Okay, this was an action item, and I think the action required is just that we're gonna go ahead and discuss this further with the whole board. Okay, so that's what we'll do. And we have one or a couple of other items on the agenda here, but we've been at this for 2 hours, so I would like to take a 5-minute break break. I don't know if anybody else is interested in doing that. Good, 5 minutes. My call.
Whether they agree with you or not.
the financial reports for April 6. Again, Kelly.
Hello. So we are in month 10 of reporting the budget status report. I'm going to. Right again. So revenue summary, we have to date, or as of April 30th, a total revenue of 28.09 million and expenses of 29.6 million. So as you can see, we have higher expenses than revenues at this point. A lot of timing issues go into the end of the fiscal year. We've paid for a lot of our debt services up front. And so revenues need to catch up through the end of the year. Last time I went through and did a lot of detailed talking. I think that I'm going to skip to the end. If you gentlemen have questions on individual parts of the report, I'm happy to answer.
The notes are really helpful. Thank you.
Going into, let's see, I was going to skip over to non-departmental. So Schedule 3. Start with each of the individual budgets. Is that it there? Right there? Schedule 3? Okay, so looking at non-departmental expenses, we're at 93.5 and the target is 83% for the first 10 months. So as I said, we're a little bit trending over the 83%, but that's because we've already expended funds for our debt services.
Kelly, help me find myself here. What schedule are you on?
I'm in schedule number 3.
Okay. Thank you.
Of course. Department 50, non-departmental.
That's all made up of just prepayment, debt service, insurance, all those things.
Oh, yes. Oh, there we go. Thank you. Kylie reminded me that we talked about the number of payments made out of payment progress. We talked about doing that information. So if you look at Schedule 3, the second page, on the right-hand side, there's a payment progress. Is that helpful for you, sir?
Hogan loan.
New Hogan loan. You're on. Oh.
Yeah,
Not a lot of money, but I just haven't seen that.
that is I think that might be, I don't know if that's our last one. That is the construction loan for the construction of the dam. It was an agreement between us, the Army Corps, and Stockton East. And so there was a loan repayment that I think we're
And we're
near.
complete.
A 50-year
Completed.
loan or so, and we just, that's smart.
Was it
Good news.
50?
Congratulations, you paid off the mortgage.
Ooh. Okay. Moving on to Department 54. Bottom line, we're at 72.8% of target. We at 10 months in, $12,304,000. We're looking pretty good. Anything that was standing out in terms of trends? I don't think there were any new items that were trending over budget too much. I think there was one thing I wanted to make a note of. Laboratory services and paving, and I think you're all aware of the paving situation already with the cost being definitely running high due to what Damon calls global uncertainty. Moving through on to, unless you have any questions, moving through to Department 56. General management, you're at 76.7% of budget at 1.24 million. Looking pretty good there. I think we do have some claims coming in from general management. What was I approved some bills this last month, but you'll see those next month. So I think we're looking pretty good there. Department 57 at 77% of target at $201,000. Nothing really of note to report there. You're trending over budget due to staff conferences and seminars and travel costs. Department 58, engineering is trending under budget at 60.1%, 1.42 million. And I think last month we talked about overtime, trending over budget. I think that's settled down a little bit. So we're in good shape there. Only 2 more to go. 59, Department 59, Administrative Services is at 76%, 6.5 million through 10 months of the year. Nothing really new there. And last but not least, Water Resources at 54.6%. I'm here if you have any questions on any of those.
About to you.
The three,
Okay.
mostly about the cost, what we're using additional money for in next year's budget, not this year.
Yeah, this is the year where we start to see relicensing expenditures ramp up. Financing plan.
Water resources budget, we got our title. I'm trying to think about this relicensing. We could say at the end about the water resources budget, and the other ones that we're all pulling these things from. Fine. Data.
We are tracking those costs. I think we could do a better job of it in the budget. And so we could break that out.
I know we're being fiscally prudent about anything like that. Now we got the money and we're putting this. We need to see.
Thinking about having resources inside expenditures versus outside.
I was wondering, would you
No.
want a FERC relicensing line item?
Yeah, I think that having it as a separate line, because right now what we've done in the past is, because we do a lot of other professional services expenditures and water resources, depending on the year. This year is the urban water management plan, there's always something different. But that one's not going away anytime soon. It's going to keep growing. So we can pull that out and track it separately and
In your project.
or more.
Yeah, so we need to figure out what our,
That's a great idea.
Last time any attention was 30 years ago.
Well, there have been license compliance costs all along. There have been other water rights and water resources costs associated with the hydro projects all along. So that's kind of, why the hydro surplus has always funded water resources, or at least that's the way I've viewed it. But relicensing is a different animal altogether. It's not because of neglect or anything like that. It's just the timeline of FERC mandated timeline of when we license. Right.
All right.
I want to thank Kylie again for preparing the report. She did a great job.
Thank you, Kylie.
Kylie. Okay, does that conclude your comments on this item? Have any public comment on this item? Nobody online. Okay. This takes us to the general manager's comments. Do you have additional comments?
Just kudos to Kelly and Kylie and the whole finance team for it's a lot of work to get up to speed, but it's been a good collaborative budget development process. So department heads have been really helpful in working through this with us and finding savings wherever we can find savings. CIP is the hardest part because a lot of our expenditures are not discretionary. Not a lot in here that is optional. So that makes it hard to find savings, but we do whatever we can. And that's just kind of the culture here, the mindset that everybody has. So keep it that way. And so thank you to the whole team and to Kamiko. It's been a great help too. So looking forward to talking through it again with the board. Appreciate the good questions in here today because that helps us clean some things up and sharpen the pencil a little bit.
Would this be an appropriate time to talk about the benefits of sending our staff and directors to regional meetings and particularly the aqua functions where we have a chance to have fortuitous
Yeah, I mean,
meetings?
I think I covered that at our last board meeting quite a bit, but there have been, yeah, those are really productive discussions where we're able to meet with the funding agencies and get our projects in front of them and find any stone that we haven't turned over already to look for infrastructure funding. That's kind of what we're on the hunt for when we're at those events.
Well, I'm constantly focusing my attention on Damon and his work with his various committee involvements in aqua. I think that we would be facing a more bleak outlook on vehicle purchases and stuff if it weren't for the efforts that you're making there, Damon. I want to express my appreciation for that. And I think that it goes without saying that if nothing else, that you've managed to push off some of our expenditures for several years because of your efforts, and that is significant. Right. Do you have any director comments?
No, I think we're making progress on the budget. Questions are there, so I'll ask them again. But nice to be part of a system that's not broken.
All right. The last thing, item 6, the next committee meeting, we will be doing this again on Tuesday, June 16th at 1 o'clock.
Clock. $1:30 throughout all my contacts.
No.
All right, I've got it correct now, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Busy guy. All right. Well, I think that concludes what we came here to do today. So this meeting is adjourned. Could you wrap your knuckles for me?